Okay, here is some information to help you prepare for your test on Chapter 6. Test is going to have 14 questions. The first 4, okay, are going to relate to laws of exponents. What do I mean by that? Let me give you a couple here to think about. I could, for example, give you a problem that looks like this. Okay, fourth root of 64x to the 5th y cubed z squared. What you need to do is you need to look at each piece one at a time, figure out how many groups of 4, because it's a fourth root, that you can pull. So let's start with 64. With 64, we don't know yet. We need to draw our prime number tree. And then we need to figure out how many groups of 4 can we make. Well, here's a group of 4 right here. And then there's 2 left over. This comes out as a 2. So our answer, okay, at least related to the 64, there'll be a 2 that comes out. And we have 2 times 2, or 4, that stays in. Now we go over to x to the 5th. Well, x to the 5th is nothing more than 5 x's. We need groups of 4, and there is a group of 4. So we pull an x out, and there's one orphan that we leave in. We look at y cubed. We cannot make a group of 4, because we only have 3 of them, so all of that stays underneath. And z squared, we cannot make a group out of z squared, so the z squared stays underneath. And then you would circle this as your answer. Okay, another example. Related to laws of exponents, if I gave you x squared y squared over x y to the negative 2. You know, when you see something like this, you see a negative exponent in the denominator. The first thing I would recommend you do is turn that into a positive exponent. How do you do that? Well, it's in the denominator. So I'll bring it up as a positive 2 in the numerator. This piece here can be brought up to a numerator by changing the negative 2 on the exponent to a positive. Now we continue on. This squared goes to both terms. So our final answer on this problem would be x to the 4th, y to the 4th. Let me give you another one. With addition. Okay, you cannot add these terms together, okay, because they are of different roots. Underneath, you got square root of 50, square root of 8. Can't make that square root of 58. That would be incorrect. But what you could do is say, well, wait a minute, can I simplify the square root of 50? And we draw a tree, and in fact, the square root of 50, I get a pair of 5s. That's square root of, that's 5 root 2. That's the orphan. Then I look at the square root of 8, and I draw its tree, and I get a pair of 2s out of that. So the square root of 8 is 2, and there's a 2 left over as an orphan. So I can rewrite this problem as 5 root 2 plus 2 root 2. Well, now I have root 2 and root 2. They're the same. I have 5 of these and 2 of these. That makes 7 of these. And so that would be your answer. Okay? After you do 4 of these types of problems, I'm going to give you 4 f of x and g of x problems. What do I mean by that? I'm going to give you an f of x. I'm going to give you a g of x. And I'm going to ask you to do things like f of x minus g of x, f of x times g of x, f of x divided by g of x, and then f of g of x. Okay, this is a composite, and these are just straight subtraction, multiplication, division. You're going to have to find the domain, okay, for all of these. So I go back to the video on domain, go back to your homeworks, make sure you can do the operation, minus, times, division, or plus, and that you can do composites and find their domains. There'll be 4 of these, okay? The next section is going to be a bunch of random things. I'm going to have you find an inverse. And remember, to find an inverse, okay, if I gave you f of x equals 3x minus 7, remember f of x is the same as y, you're going to swap your x's and your y's. So y to x and x to y, then you're going to solve for this in terms of y, and that's what you're going to do, something like that. The next problem is going to give you f of x and a g of x, and I'm going to ask you to tell me whether they're inverses of each other. Okay? Now remember, for functions to be inverses of each other, you have to do the composite f of g of x, and then you have to do g of f of x. If you simplify f of g of x and it simplifies to x, and if you do g of f of x and it simplifies to x, both of these, then in fact these two functions are inverses of each other. And then the last piece will be 4 problems to solve. 4 solves. This is 6.6. This is the last thing we just learned. You'll have to do 4 of these. And if you did your homework in 6.6, you should not have much difficulty in doing the ones on the test. So there's 4 of them. So as you're studying over the weekend or prior to the test, if you're having any difficulties with 6.6, let me know. Anyway, that's the sum total. There'll be 14 problems on it. Good luck with your studies.